the Washington NAACP Youth Council's 2020 through 2021 demands, along with BLM at School's Year of Purpose. Today we will be hearing from NAACP Youth Council leaders representing 5 Washington school districts, along with BLM at School representatives Jesse Hagopian and Bruce Jackson. On top of that, featured speaker Tracy Castro-Gill, Executive Director of of Washington Ethnic Studies Now, will be the final presenter of the evening prior to the Q&A. Unfortunately, our other featured speaker, Marquita Prinzing, may not be able to join us tonight because of a family emergency. Okay, and lastly, before I pass the mic off to Alexis, I just want to remind everyone that the Q&A will be open throughout the event and your questions will be answered at the end.
Okay, hello everyone, my name is Alexis. I'm a sophomore at Foster High School in Tukwila. And as we move on throughout the night, we want to tell everyone that we do have ASL interpreters here. And there's a diagram. First of all, thank you both for being here. Their names are Bobby and Joel. There's a diagram in the top right corner about how to pin their video. However, I know that there were some difficulties getting that to work. So what was the plan about that part? Okay. Great. Thank you for that feedback. Oh, sorry. Should we? Well, we'll come back to that because I know there was a plan to go later. Moving on, we want to do a land acknowledgement, of course, because we want to respectfully acknowledge that this meeting is being held on the traditional lands of the Duwamish, the Skokomish, the Snohomish, Snoqualmie, Suquamish, and other Coast Salish tribes. We want to obviously respect the people that were here before us and that are currently here. And then if you go to the next slide, please. We want to also put action behind that acknowledgement. And so this initiative called the Real Rent Duwamish initiative is kind of faced by the face of it, I guess, is the Duwamish chairwoman, Cecile Hansen. She's put together this initiative to, like I said, put action behind acknowledgement and pay that effort forward, sorry. And then in the same light of acknowledgement, in the next slide, we have a screenshot of a website called nativeland.ca where you can find the traditional group that is in the area that you are currently in, because we know that we are not all in the same place. So we encourage you to move forward with that and again put action behind the acknowledgement. Now I will pass it on to Mia to talk about the history and other things about the NAACP Youth Council.
Okay, hi, my name is Mia Dabney. I am a junior at Cleveland High School, and I'm just going to give you like a short recap of what we've done over the past couple of years. So we are the NAACP Youth Council. We were founded in 2017, and we are a Seattle-based group, and we've branched out to other school districts as well. And as a group, we focus on fighting for racial equality and overall uplifting youth voices on issues that impact us. In the next couple of slides, you can see past and present members at school board meetings and MLK Day and other events that we participated in. Next slide, please. Yes, and this is perfect. Okay. So at the top, we have Rita Green, and at the bottom, we have Sabrina Burr. And they both are very big parts of the NAACP Youth Council because they did help fight for the grants so students are able to get paid for the work we do, because it does take a lot of time out of our days. And so Rita Green is the NAACP Youth Council Project Planner and Education Chair. And then Sabrina Burr is a current she's a current advisor for the PTSA and the BSK Partner Grant co-author. So they both help give us the money that we need so we are paid and get the work that we need done. And we wouldn't be here without them, of course.
All right, thank you, Mia and Alexis. We are now going to move into the first round of demands from the NAACP Youth Council, and these are not related to BLM at schools. And our first speaker is going to be Leah.
Hello, everyone. My name is Leah Scott, and I'm the co-president of the NAACP Youth Council. And as a council, we believe it is important that as a community, we allow students' voices to shine and contribute more. And for me, as a student who is well known for speaking up, if you know me, I want to find more ways to get not only my voice heard, but others. This makes me really proud to introduce this demand, which is to increase the voice of youth, especially BIPOC youth. And if you don't know what BIPOC stands for, it's Black, Indigenous, People of Color, in all levels of decision-making and public education. And in order to really ensure that our district members are making decisions that students want and need, we must have students in the room where those decisions are being made, the room being the school board. This is the way we can drastically increase youth voice in our districts. Youth voice has been ignored for too long, and it is time for us to be a part of the co-planning alongside the adult change makers and not be kept in the dark. Within this demand, one of the biggest projects we are working on is getting students on the school board. We have partnered with several different district leaders and community members to make this happen, specifically within Seattle Public Schools. And we want to not stop at just Seattle Public Schools. We want to move beyond that. Students' voices deserve to be heard everywhere and have their opinions and needs not only heard, but listened to. And that is why we have this demand. It is for the students, made by the students. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Leah. Speaking of the next demand, we have Kaylee and Alexis.
Hi, I'm Kaylee, and I'm a junior at Meadowdale High School. As the NAACP Youth Council, one of our demands is to mandate thorough and frequent staff racial equity training. And this demand, it addresses rigorous anti-racist screening as part of the hiring process, mandating schools to train teachers and staff at all levels, so K through 12, in anti-racist strategies and concepts, which must be co-led by BIPOC students or youth. Increase accountability for staff on issues including but not limited to racism, sexism, homophobia, and other forms of oppression, and mandating reflections and evaluation for growth. And it also covers creating or improving racial equity teams and making sure they meet consistently, and the inclusion of disenfranchised voices. To go into further detail, we want to meet with school districts, community members, or any other groups to discuss this. And as of right now, there's no specific project starting, except that we have a list of topics that could be taught. Though we are looking forward to starting projects after this launch. But we do have a vision for this and a goal. Our vision is to have race and equity teams throughout all schools in Washington, which is co-led staff training with BIPOC students or youth. We want this to be consistent, and this is perfect for professional development days, and every training session must have notes for transparency and accountability. To figure out what issues need to be addressed and taught, it could be recorded through quarterly surveys from the students, and our goal is obviously for this structure to be used in all districts across Washington and for NYC to be a part of this action as well. Due to the overwhelmingly white teaching force, too many educators are unprepared to teach ethnic studies or teach about cultures in general, to teach BIPOC students, work with BIPOC colleagues, and they're unprepared to create and maintain positive relationships with BIPOC families and communities. There's too many stories of racism happening at school, and too many stories of teachers being the ones who are performing that, and too many students are getting away with racist acts at school. And this is why we need that training, because even if you do have training, we need to do better and we need to improve better. So if you claim your schools and classrooms are a safe space for any students, make sure this applies to BIPOC students, acknowledging that the education system is already racist within itself and educating yourself outside of your comfort zone and decolonizing your classrooms.
Thanks so much for those words, Kaylee. Everything that you said was absolutely true. And I just want to add one thing before we move on to our next demand is that there's no reason for you to be in the teaching field or any field for that matter if you're not equipped to handle the responsibility of being an equitable educator. And if you're not adequately trained to be an equitable educator, then your competency to be that is not something that we can trust. And we need to trust our educators. So yes, thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Alexis and Kaylee. We are now going to welcome back Leah and also Sanaya to talk about this demand.
Yeah, Sanaya, go ahead and go first before me.
Hi, this is Aaliyah. Sanaya, I'm so sorry, but Sanaya is experiencing some technical difficulties right now, but she should be able to speak in maybe like 5 minutes. Is there any way you could come back to her?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much.
Leah, do you want to speak on this demand right now, or should we just come back to it?
Yeah, I can speak on it right now. Yeah, so one of our biggest demands right now is to increase access to opportunities in mental health services. And I will just be addressing the opportunities part of this. And though I will only be speaking on the opportunities portion, which includes many different aspects, within this demand, we mentioned schools needing to provide more information on the opportunities that are already available, like internships and summer programs and more. And when in the process of making more of these opportunities, that schools make the extra effort to better the community around them by partnering with BIPOC-led local small business owners and partnering with these community members to create internships, mentorships, and more. Truly, the possibilities are endless, and the benefits as well, not only for the community, but for the student body we are trying to serve. When we are talking about opportunities in education, I want to take the time to speak on a very important part of all of this: financial literacy. The implementation of financially literate curriculum is one of the projects for this demand. Essentially, this curriculum would include how to do your taxes, file out the FAFSA, budgeting, stocks, and even more essential life skills that schools currently don't teach us. And currently within our educational system, we have no curriculum like this. And the connection is that despite the amount of opportunity and resources we provide for our students, if they truly do not know how to use them to their advantage, then what are we doing? When we talk about providing more opportunities for students, we must not only do so in a form of mentorships or scholarships, but within the classroom. Provide them the opportunity to know how to manage their life as an adult. Misconceptions about higher education and optimal career paths are not being debunked by schools. Instead, they are being encouraged. Meaning that we must reassess the college-only culture we have within our educational systems and make alternative paths that may truly be better for specific students. Today, as a senior, I find myself having to learn the truly critical concepts to know in my life by myself, such as how to file my own taxes, budgeting my own income and spending. School truly had the opportunity to teach me all of this, but didn't. And I've always really wondered why. Thank you.
Thank
We
you
could
again.
pause for, if we could just pause for 1 moment to switch interpreters.
Yeah, of course.
And we're ready.
All right, thank you again, Leah. Our next speaker is Gian. Gian, are you there?
Oh, I was on mute. Hi, my name is Gian. I am a graduate of Rainier Beach High School. One of our demands as the NAACP Youth Council is calling for the abolition of Washington State's highly capable cohort program. We believe that it is fundamentally flawed and perpetuates systematic racism. The program segregates students based on the label of gifted. There are entry barriers that serve as gatekeepers, preventing Black, Indigenous, Latinx, students with disabilities, students experiencing poverty, and migrant students from participating in the program. Additionally, the Washington state law says that the legislature intends to allocate funding based on 5% of each school district's population, which limits the number of students in the program and making it exclusive. Additionally, the HEC curriculum is not anti-racist or culturally responsive. I also want to make it clear that one Black or brown student in the HEC program does not make the program less racist. Diversity does not make a program less racist. Therefore, we demand the HEC program be abolished, and instead the state should provide education programs that benefits all students and centers Black, Indigenous, and people of color students to address disparities and inequities in our education system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gian. Our next speakers are Kaylee and Leah again.
This demand is to mandate climate change education and emphasize environmental racism and dramatically decrease the carbon footprint of public schools. To go into further detail, this demand consists of having an environmental literacy class, which must cover environmental racism, and making an engaging curriculum, like having competitions that incentivize and ultimately instill great habits, like what school has the best garden, etc. We already have some projects like the Climate Change March and the 100% Clean Project, which is a policy that's trying to be implemented that commits Seattle Public Schools to using 100% clean renewable energy in their institutions. This demand will not only be a great educational benefit, but this will benefit our environment and community. Throughout this year, we've seen so much of the consequences of climate change, such as wildfires, hurricanes, rapid change of temperature or global warming, and animal extinction. And overall, many students don't know how big of a deal climate change is, and many adults don't even know that too. And it's really important to teach and educate about this because it affects our lives in the future and our lives in the present.
Can I say something real quick? I just wanted to add on, like, I did not know anything about climate change. As a matter of fact, my teacher in 5th grade told me it was fake. And I thought that until like I found out what climate change was this year, and I feel like that's kind of sad. And the fact that our Earth is dying so soon, we have to do something about it. So I think this demand is like really important.
Thank you so much, Kaylee and Martha. Is there anyone else who wants to step in and say anything about this demand? If not, we are going to move on to our next demand, where we will have Angelina and Rena speaking.
Angelina, do you want to go first? Sure. So my name is Angelina. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm co-president of the NAACP Youth Council. I'm also a senior at Rainier Beach High School. So this demand talks about supporting the Black Lives Matter at school, which is including this new year of purpose that has been formed. And so Black Lives Matter at School is a list of demands, and actually is a national organization which wants to highlight, or usually has like a week where they highlight different Black Lives Matter initiatives and goals in our educational spaces. And the Seattle Public Schools District has adopted their plans for over for about 2 years now. And this year is a full year plan where we have different days dedicated to different people, different events, just in the wake of the issues and the uprise that has occurred over the past few months. And we just wanted to highlight that Black Lives Matter should never be confined to a week. It cannot be confined to a month. And it has a major impact on every Black person, every non-Black person, every single day of the year. Our lives matter.
Also to add on, I would just like to say that I think that this year of purpose is really important for Black students to see themselves represented, because so often we see ourselves represented in a negative light, or in a negative light, or with a lot of false narratives and false truths that people like to push on us and tell us that that is where we're headed, or that's like the only way that we will live. But I think that the year of purpose is important, not only to let students know that their life is important 360 days rather than 28, but to also let them know that they don't have to be confined to these boxes that society puts them in, or these stereotypes society puts them in. They can be whatever they want. They can grow up to do whatever they want. They don't have to be confined to these small spaces that are continuously perpetuated against them. They can grow up and they can do whatever they want. They can become the first astronauts, the first doctors, the first lawyers, the first Congress members, the first anything that they want if they put their mind to it. And they can break these stereotypes that are so often perpetuated against us.
And it's also good because we have this week to perpetuate, or just to bring out the narrative that we are when we focus on Black Lives Matter. So often we think about Black Lives Matter as it is basically, usually when we have our protests, it is a space for us to mourn. Rather, we use this time to celebrate Black life while we are here, because we should be celebrating us while we're here and not always mourning our deaths.
Greatly said, both of you. And that brings us to a great place to transition to our first speakers of the night, Jesse Hagopian and Bruce Jackson, who are here to represent Black Lives Matter at School and introduce the Year of Purpose.
Excellent. Thank you so much for the invitation. It's an honor to be with all of you incredible young organizers, and the demands you've put forward are so powerful. And so thank you for the invitation to share a bit more about the Year of Purpose. And it's great to be here with Bruce. Are you there, Bruce?
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Well done, you.
Excellent. Well, I want to share more about Black Lives Matter at School and our new Year of Purpose initiative that I hope all educators and parents and students will engage in this year throughout the school year. Because as our youth just pointed out, we had a week of action for the last 3 years, but we can't confine the struggle for Black lives to a single week. And so in the wake of this uprising that is occurring right now, we knew we needed to develop a new framework to help, especially educators, teach for Black lives every day of the year. And we hope that this framework is useful. We are really, and it's just incredible that what started here in Seattle in 2016 has now erupted onto a national scene and become this Year of Purpose. And I just want to remind people that it was at John Muir Elementary School in 2016 where educators and family and a group called Black Men United to Change the Narrative with Deshaun Jackson and the great art teacher, Julie Trout, got together, and they decided they wanted to hold an event to celebrate their Black students' lives. And you got to remember that was in the wake of the killing of Philando Castile and Alton Sterling. And they wanted to celebrate their Black students' lives at the beginning of the school year. So they organized an event to high five the youth as they came in and to have a Black history celebration in the school that day. And then a hateful person made a bomb threat against an elementary school for the audacity of the educators there to want to wear shirts to school that said Black Lives Matter, we stand together, that were designed by Julie. And after that, you know, we brought those educators into the Social Equity Educators Caucus meeting, and we developed a plan that we took to our union, and we passed a resolution that said not only do we stand with John Muir, but if we really support them, we will all wear the shirts that say Black Lives Matter to school. They can't threaten every educator in every school. And with the partnership with the Black student unions and with the NAACP and with the PTSA of Seattle and some of the great organizers that are on this call today, we were able to organize to get some 3,000 out of the 5,000 educators to wear the shirts to school on October 19th, and many to teach lessons about institutional racism and about Black Lives Matter and the long Black freedom struggle. And that eruption of struggle in Seattle caught the attention of some other great organizers in Philadelphia who took what we did to the next level. They took the day of action and expanded it to a week of action, and they broke down the 13 principles of the Black Lives Matter Global Network into teaching points for each day of the week. And that was our framework for the week of action. And I want to start now with the video to tell you a little bit more about why we are organizing this this Black Lives Matter at School movement. And then I'll explain a little bit more about what the new year of purpose is. So if you can go to the next slide and play the video.
What is happening in our schools today is heartbreaking.
This is one of the racist rants discovered Monday at Oak Park River Forest High School.
Our kids are being called the N-word. We have white students who think it's okay to come to school for Halloween with a KKK mask.
1.6 million children in this country go to a school where there's a police officer but no counselor.
Educators in Washington State are 90% white.
I'm not getting the education that I need as a Black male.
The people who have done the conquering have been the ones that we've been lauding in school.
Kobe, who's in the 9th grade at Pearland High School, was studying immigration when he read this in his textbook, a comment that referenced African slaves as workers.
All I ever see is us being slaves, you know? Like, why don't you ever teach me, you know, how we fought back? Because I know my people are strong.
A referee at a high school wrestling match in New Jersey told a wrestler he had to cut his dreadlocks or forfeit the match.
I see people around me who are hurt, and it is wrong to not speak up.
Black Lives Matter at School is a declaration that Black students deserve to be taught the truth and that their lives have value.
It gives students not only of color, but of other races and ethnicities a chance to see different cultures.
We have lessons for every single day, Monday through Friday. So there's about 2 to 3 principles per day that are connected.
We participated in this last year, and a lot of feedback we got from educators who have never really experienced ethnic studies in the classroom was that their students were more engaged in this content than they had ever seen before.
I learned so much through that really empowered me as a Black male. This is probably the first time I really was excited about school. You know, it's something that I'm passionate about now.
Well, thanks for sharing that video. I hope you understand the urgency of the struggle to transform public education and uproot institutional racism. And now I'm really excited to share with you the new National Black Lives Matter at School Year of Purpose framework. So if you could go to the next slide. All right, and the next one.
Can we pause for a moment to switch interpreters?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Don't forget the pledge, Jesse.
Yes, good point.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, thank you. So we want to call on educators to make a pledge to join the Black Lives Matter at School Year of Purpose. And if you go to blacklivesmatteratschool.com, you can find our pledge and you can sign up to say that you will be part of this. And maybe someone in the chat can drop that in. There it is. Okay. And there's two major components of the Black Lives Matter at School Year of Purpose. The first component you see on the screen right now, which is 5 reflection questions that we're calling on all educators, especially, but I think all parents and students would benefit greatly as well from examining these and reflecting on them. But we're calling on everybody to answer these questions and then reflect on them throughout the school year and reflect on your progress towards these. So number 1 says, what is our school's relationship to the Black community organizing? Do we have relationships with local movement organizers? Do they see our school as a place that believes in their mission? Do they see our school as a place to connect with local families? Number 2, how are school-wide policies and practices, especially disciplinary practices, applied across categories of race? Do problematic patterns emerge when we look at how policies are applied to Black students and when we also consider the intersections of gender, of sexual orientation and disability with Blackness, right? So we have an intersectional approach to supporting Black lives, and we also want to make sure that the disproportionate discipline rates that are highest against Black girls, but we also know that Black students overall are suspended at 4 times the rates of white students, and we want to change that. Number 3 says, how are the voices, accomplishments, and successes of Black folks uplifted in my lessons, my units, and my curriculum? Rather than focus on singular events and individuals, does my approach highlight the everyday actions and community organizing that will lead to change? Number 4, in what ways do our practices erase the histories of our students and prevent them from bringing their whole selves into the learning environment? And finally, how do I understand the role that local state laws have and policies have on the educational experiences of my students? What is my role in working to change policies, regulations, and practices that harm Black students and families? So the idea here is that you'll reflect on your own pedagogical practices in relationship to anti-racist methods, and also that you'll reflect on your relationship to the struggle, to the larger Black freedom movement that is in the streets, and finding ways to connect our education to that struggle. If you could go to the next slide. And so, besides these reflection questions that we hope can help transform pedagogy and educator practice, we also have developed a series of actions, and there is 1 day of action for every month of the school year, in addition to our week of action during the first week of February that we will continue to organize. The first day of action was the first day of school, where we asked educators to answer these questions that you just saw, and also to talk about what you will do differently this year to further the movement for Black lives. The next day of action is coming right up, and I really hope that everybody finds a way to celebrate and to struggle on October 14th, Justice for George Day. That's George Floyd's birthday. And this is an opportunity for us to bring in many different issues into the classroom that are happening in Seattle. The uprising that's in the streets that's calling for fundamental changes in our justice system. November 20th is Transgender Day of Remembrance, and we want to look at the intersection of Blackness and transgender identity. And we want to also celebrate William Dorsey Swann. This is an important day for us to understand the intersectional understanding of Black identity. If you could go to the next slide. On December 3rd is International Peoples with Disabilities Day, and we want to highlight the intersection of disabilities and Blackness on this day and lift up our all of our Black community that lives with different disabilities. And it's also the day that we're going to highlight the BLM Global Network's principles of globalism and collective value. We have queer organizing behind the scenes in January, because we know we usually celebrate Martin Luther King in January, as we should, but we also need to remember that it was Bayard Rustin, a Black gay man, that organized the March on Washington. And either Bayard Rustin is completely erased from most of history's tellings of the March on Washington, or his sexuality is ignored or suppressed. Unapologetically Black Day is next on February 18th, the birthdays of Audre Lorde and Toni Morrison, some of the most gifted people in history with language and writing. And then Student Activist Day is March 6th. And this is Barbara John's birthday. And everybody should know about Barbara Johns. She was a freedom fighter that transformed our country. Everybody knows about the Brown versus Board of Education decision, but what most people don't know is that one of the cases that was brought forward that created that court decision was launched by Barbara Johns, who was a Black high school student in the South who led a mass walkout at her school and demanded that the Black schools get the same funding as the white schools. And the desegregation of schools was actually launched not just by lawyers in courtrooms, but by students fighting for their rights. If you could go to the next slide. And then we have Revolutionary Black Arts in April. We know that our schools need much more focus on arts, and there's some incredible Black artists that you see listed there that need to be taught about and understood. We have Black Radical Educator Day on Septima Clark's birthday, one of the towering figures in the civil rights movement, someone who educated many activists, including Rosa Parks. Say Her Name Day, to uplift the many Black women who have been victims of state violence and police murder, but who often go overlooked and who are overshadowed by many of the men who have been killed. And we want to raise up Breonna Taylor. And here in Seattle, we want to raise up Charlena Lyles and so many other of our Black women and also Black trans women. And then we have 11 is Education for Liberation Day, where we're going to look at Black families and diversity. And this is going to be celebrated on Juneteenth. And understanding that struggle to end the enslavement of Africans and the ongoing Black freedom struggle we're in. And then finally, the last day of school is a day to review all 13 principles and to reflect on the questions that we hope you all answered at the beginning of the year. So thank you for your time. Please visit blacklivesmatteratschool.com for more information on how you can participate in this growing national movement.
Thank you so much for your presentation. As he said, stay up to date, stay consistent, and look for resources that you can apply to your classrooms. And yeah, thank you. As we move on to the next part of our presentation, we have our second round of demands. These demands are in some way paralleled or in close relation to the demands of Black Lives Matter at school. So to start us off, we will have Rena speak.
Hi, my name is Rena. I'm first vice president of the NAACP Youth Council. I am a junior at Cleveland High School. And the first demand that I'll be talking about is restorative justice in schools. At Cleveland, we are a restorative justice high school. And I think that restorative justice is important because a lot of times with my experience in my K-12 with having police officers and like security guards in schools, it was more of like the Black and students of color were targeted because of the color of their skin. Like if a white student were to be kicked out of class, as opposed to a Black or brown student, they would treat the white student with more care as like, hey, like what's going on? Did you eat today? Like, is there something wrong? Like, can you tell me why you're out of class? As opposed to the Black or brown student, it's, hey, you know, like you need to get to class. Like, I don't understand. Like every time we see you in the hallway, you're always out of, like there was like a complete 180 flip when it came to like students based on like their race basically. But when I went to Cleveland and I saw the restorative justice program, like it was like a whole different world basically. So the way that it is you are able to communicate with your teachers or somebody that you have the problem with, and you sit down and you talk to them like you would in the real world. It's not you being criminalized or people looking at you with presumption of guilt. It's you talking to whoever you have the problem with, or just talking with the person in general and figuring out what is going to happen, whether, how do you want to proceed with this? Do you not want to talk to them anymore? Do you want to talk it out? Like where do we go from here? And there's two, at my school, there's two circle keepers. So they kind of facilitate the circle, and they make sure that everybody has come to a common ground by the end of the circle, and they make sure that everybody is like on the same page. And I noticed that at my K-8 school, the suspension rate was way higher than when I went to Cleveland. Like that I know of, there's only been one person that has been suspended because of their restorative justice program. And I think that it's important that everybody in Seattle Public, not only in Seattle Public Schools, but in every district implements restorative justice, because it gives Black and brown students a chance to not have to look over their shoulders, not only when they're in the classroom, but when they're just walking down the street, just being themselves. Because when you're in school and you're always looked at as like society stereotypes. So if you're always looked at as not as a victim, as a criminal or a thug or just stuff like that, that like I've heard security guards call students, which is not okay. That's kind of like what you think. It's like, wow, well, if that's what the whole world thinks of me, then, you know, I might as well do that. But if you give students a fighting chance to be who they are and express who they are, and like the potential that they have, then that gives them so much more, not only to express their emotions, but to express like what they can be. Because in the real world, like when you get in trouble, like in the workplace, there's not going to be like a security guard that's going to stop you and do the stuff that security guards do. You're going to have to learn how to talk it out with your coworker or with like whatever the problem is. So restorative justice not only is giving students a chance to be themselves in school, it's also setting them up for the real world. So when they have to talk conflicts out, and when they have to face these one-on-one problems with people, they're ready for those communication skills, and they don't like shut down, like they're prepared.
Thank you, Rena. Next, we have Anissa and Angelina speaking.
Hi, everyone. I'm Anissa Roydad. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a graduate of Ballard High School. So like Rena was talking about with our restorative justice demands, BIPOC and other marginalized students are policed physically in schools, but we're also intellectually policed with our white-centric, whitewashed, male-centric, heteronormative, ableist, in a word, our oppressive curriculum. Our current curriculum is so detrimental to students, not only because it's just straight up false, but because it hinders our identity growth to not see people like us represented in the curriculum. It disrupts our sense of belonging, again, because we're just not being seen and represented. And it, most of all, maintains oppression by teaching a false narrative. That is why the Youth Council is demanding that all Washington districts implement ethnic studies and Black studies, which Angelina will go into more detail on.
Yeah, again, my name is Angelina, and I'm the co-president of the NAACP Youth Council. And yeah, just to add on to what Anissa's said so far, when we're talking about adding ethnic studies and adding Black studies into our schools, we're talking about a myriad of different issues, you know. I think representation, especially in our education, is a core value that is often ignored or undervalued. When we're seeing that, districts that have implemented these policies and have implemented the curriculum are seeing changes in how students really take in information and really act in classes, because they're seeing themselves represented in the curriculum. When our school, I go to Rainier Beach High School, every year when we do our Black Lives Matter at School week, and we focus mainly on Black history, or we incorporate ethnic studies into every single course, we see a shift in how students react to that, and how students take in information, as I said before. And we believe that it's imperative that we do so at all times, in every grade level and every course. There has to be ways for us to not only represent, but also show teachers and students how to change the world in these ways. I mean, I think if you don't see yourself reflected, if you don't see yourself represented in a community, or you don't see yourself as belonging to a community, then how can you take responsibility for it someday and take responsibility for changing the course in which the world, our society goes in? So yeah, that's our ethnic studies demand.
And just really quickly to add on, Angelina, you say this a lot, and I love this phrase when you say education is emancipation. And I really think that sums up what ethnic studies and Black studies are for students.
Absolutely. I will be speaking on our next demand, which is to hire and retain. Sorry?
I'm sorry, can we pause one moment to switch interpreters?
Absolutely.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
No, you're fine.
Okay, we're good. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next demand is to hire and retain more Black educators. To me, it's simple. There's no reason that these school buildings should be 70, 80, 90% students of color, yet the staff demographic is 70, 80, 90% white teachers. At my school, I know just in the past 2 years that at least five that I know of, teachers of color have either left for whatever reason, been pushed out, etc. It's not only critical to our education for students to have their history and their curriculum be taught from a accurate and equitable lens, but it's also imperative that we are taught by those people from that same lens. We should be represented in our textbooks as well as through the people teaching us. It's a win-win situation because multiple studies have shown that not only students of color benefit from having teachers of color, but white students as well. Not only should we be hiring more teachers of color, especially Black teachers, but retaining them. And just because you hire Black teachers doesn't mean that you're creating a safe and equitable space for them to thrive. As Gian mentioned earlier in the Abolish HCC demand, just because you have diversity, which we can get into if that diversity is a whitewash version of diversity or not, that doesn't make your building or your classroom or etc. anti-racist. And we should all be anti-racist. This shouldn't be something that is new or taboo or optional and elective. It should be the standard. No questions about it. There's so many systems in place, and we always say that the systems are racist, the systems are sexist, the systems are fill in the blank. But at the end of the day, there are people behind those systems. And as people behind those systems, we need to be doing the work to move forward and advance in our society as anti-racists. I will now pass it on to our next demand, which is fund counselors, not cops. NYC doesn't have a directly paralleled demand on our end, so we will pass it to Bruce from Black Lives Matter at School.
Yeah, we're gonna need the next slide. We're at the Seattle Education Association, our union. We decided that after the uprising, we decided that we needed to remove cops from our schools. So we as a union voted in June, I think, to remove them all, and that's what we did. So the half of that demand has been met. We no longer will have police officers in our schools. And we need the next slide. That is also very important. Our mayor, Jenny Durkin, and in our favorable city council, Jenny Durkin has pledged $100 million to community-led equitable for equitable programs. This is double speak, but I think if the money exists, and it has to exist, we can turn that money into money for all of us. We can turn it into educators of color. We can turn it into counseling. We need more counselors than we do police officers. We need to defund police in that aspect. Move money from the police officers to counseling. After COVID, after this year of incredible trauma, we need counselors in our schools way more than we need people bashing in our heads. So it is my hope, and we will find threads to get in on these meetings. They're talking about creating organizations that distribute this money. Those organizations have been created. We need to find out where these meetings are taking place, get in there, and make that money come our way. And that's pretty much all I had to say.
Thank you. This would be the part where we have our featured speaker, Marquita Pringzing, speaking. However, she did have a family emergency and she won't be able to attend the event. But we are all sending her positive energy and wishing her the best.
Okay, before we move into our third rounds of demands, which are Seattle specific, I want to welcome Sanaya to talk about GeoTV, which is an initiative that isn't actually an NYC demand, but it is something we are supporting.
Hi guys, I'm Sanaya. Leading up until the election this November, NYC has been partnering with the Get Out the Vote campaign to increase voter turnout in Washington and specifically among the Black community. And there's just so much on the line this election year. I think after seeing the healthcare system's failures, specifically throughout this pandemic and how they disproportionately affect BIPOC communities, as well as the lack of seriousness so many politicians have for police reform, And I think with all of the marching and the protesting, we need to get people of color to the table to vote in order to fight for our own liberation. When BIPOC individuals vote, we see more people in office who not just support communities of color, but are people of color. And research shows that advancing BIPOC representation in politics is not only a matter of fairness, but it helps influence policy agendas, debates, and political engagement of underrepresented voters. Many of the people who fail to vote are the people who are majorly affected by these policies from local politics and beyond. So it's about more than just voting for the president. It's about having a say in the ballot measures and the policies that will have an effect on your everyday lives. One example I wanted to bring up was that this year we will vote to either approve or reject referendum 90, which will determine whether or not public schools will be required to provide a comprehensive sexual education to all students. So it's just way too big of a year to not have a say, to not get your vote in.
Thank you, Sanaya. So now we're going to move into our Seattle-specific demands, and the first speakers will be Rena and Gian.
Gian, do you want to go first? Gian, if you're talking, you're on mute.
Oh, sorry. I was I asked if you wanted to go first.
No, it's okay. You can go.
Yeah. So one of our demands is adding the ethnic studies demand to the strategic plan. I'm unsure if anyone knows, but previously the ethnic studies was included in the previous superintendent Nyland's strategic plan, so it was funded. However, in our new superintendent's strategic plan, it was not included, so the program was not funded. And so one of our demands is to add the ethnic studies program into the strategic plan so that it has to be mandated by the superintendent to be within our schools, in our classrooms.
To add on to that, ethnic studies was a really big conversation before the strategic plan. And kind of after the strategic plan came out, it was kind of on the back burner. And our NYC's question was, like, what happened to it? And the district's response was, well, since the word ethnic studies was not in the strategic plan, we're really focusing on what's been in the strategic plan and not, ethnic studies, basically. But basically, to add on kind of what Gian said, if you want to implement everything that's in the strategic plan, you have to implement ethnic studies, because ethnic studies isn't just a curriculum. It's something that sets you up for the real world. And it's something that gives you different views and different experiences on different people's religions, different people's beliefs, different people in general. So when you go out in the world, you're not blind as to one perspective, you have different perspectives. Because as quiet as it's kept, when I graduate from college, I don't think I'm going to use the quadratic formula or y equals mx plus b every day of my life. But if I were to learn ethnic studies, that is something that I would take with me for the rest of my life, and that I would probably teach my kids and my grandkids, because it's something that's so crucial and vital for youth of now and for the future to learn, so that they have those experiences and that they have that knowledge when they go into the real world.
Thank you so much, Rena and Gian. And for this next demand, I'm going to welcome back Gian again alongside Miracle.
One of our demands for the Seattle specific area is to renovate Rainier Beach High School in an occupied renovation and completed before 2024. A brief history is Rainier Beach High School is the last high school to be fully renovated in the Seattle Public Schools and serves a predominantly Black and Brown student population. The Rainier Beach High School Performing Arts Center was not built as originally designed in 1960. It wasn't completed until 2000, so four decades later. Between 1998 and 2013, Rainier Beach High School received $28 million in school renovations and fixes. 2002 was the last time Rainier Beach High School was renovated, when our library was renovated. While other high schools have received complete renovations and hundreds of millions of dollars more in renovation funding during the same time period, Rainier Beach High School serves a predominantly Black and brown student population and is the last high school to be fully renovated in Seattle Public Schools. Rainier Beach High School educators, community members, students like Naj Ali, Virginia Bethea, Essence Robertson, Hani, and many other folks have advocated for a better learning environment since 2013. And Director Patu has advocated for the renovations since she was an educator in the 2000s. And recently, parents and students have continued to show up in the past 8 years in school board meetings until Rainier Beach High School was added to the BEX 5 levy in 2018. Now, I want to end with this, and I want to make it clear that the Rainier Beach High School renovation demand is more than renovating the building. It is about the equitable distribution of dollars to schools in need, like Rainier Beach High School. Because we know that there are many hurdles placed on our Black and brown students in our society, which prevents them from succeeding. Thank you.
Miracle, do you also want to speak on this demand, or any other NYC members? All right, if not, we are going to move on to our final demand, where Angelina and Rena will be speaking.
Hi, again, my name is Angelina. So some may not know, but I was a former member of 2 years for the Superintendent Juno's Advisory Board. And on July 10th of this year, I and the majority of our original members formally resigned for a couple of reasons that I'll explain. I joined the board back in November of 2018 with the promise that my voice would be heard and that students in schools across the district would be represented. And unfortunately, throughout my time with the board, I didn't see that happening. And I would come to find that my voice made little to no difference to the system of schooling or the different operatives that our schools had. On several occasions where we'd asked for transparency or demanded more seats at the table, we were turned away and we were given tasks that did not relate to the list of issues that we planned to discuss when the group was first brainstorming its list of demands and its purpose at its birth. And though we had a few occasions where we were able to have slight input on the strategic plan, we didn't really see many of our ideas reflected in the final product. So we demanded several changes throughout the years to the structure of the board itself, including a student elected candidate cabinet and the removal of city year, which were, individuals who specialize in discussion facilitations, which we felt wasn't really necessary for a discussion between a superintendent and youth, and that demand wasn't met. Furthermore, the one-year ban on SPD in Seattle Public Schools that was made the week after I and others in the community started to push for these changes. Superintendent had initially created that ban for 1 year with no plan on how different communities would be consulted with. She never consulted with us, her advisory board, or organizers, which she knew who were on the front lines, and we felt ignored. We felt like she wasn't engaging with us. My next point is education is emancipation. As Anise had reminded, I say a lot. The district strategic plan states over and over again that they will center students furthest from educational justice. However, the superintendent terminated a partnership with a program meant to create a curriculum that centers Black and Indigenous history without consulting her advisory board, and specifically the students furthest from educational justice. We're just wanted to reiterate that courses that center Black and Brown stories and curriculum that acknowledges our complex history yet affirms our greatness is important. And in doing so, she has extended inequities that exist in our education, which further affects the future of our society. And those actions perpetuate anti-Blackness and they perpetuate racism. At a time where millions of people are in the streets protesting for liberation, it has shown us that she does not value Black voices. And without honoring Black student voices, they're neglecting Black education, which is ultimately our liberation. And it is so subtly showing us that we don't matter. And we all know that when all lives will not matter until Black lives do. We also want to acknowledge the treatment of our formal ethnic studies manager and other SPS staff who have been removed in unethical manners, including being escorted out of the Seattle Public Schools John Stanford building, and the 300 calls to SPD and 40 arrests in one school year, the placement of white staff members with no personal background on BIPOC American experiences in positions made to benefit Black students from those communities. We want to acknowledge the lack of follow through on dismantling the HCC. We want to acknowledge the whitewashing of anti-racist curriculum, the leading with ego, the lack of family engagement, the lack of student engagement, and we want to make this clear that my education and the education of my peers is not a surface issue. This is about the fact that I watched my classmates lose interest in every class for years. It's about my Black peers that I watched get physically assaulted by teachers and by staff members. It's about this fight for Black girls in our schools who are being over-disciplined and criminalized from young ages. It's about Black students who feel they need to assimilate to culture in order to get closer to opportunities that their white counterparts do not have to work as hard to be recognized for. It's about how our Black Lives Matter week is confined to a week and only recognized when one of us is murdered. This is about the fight for LGBT+ youth in our schools who hardly ever receive the support they deserve when someone incites hatred towards them. This is the fight for special ed students in my school. It's a fight for the students who come to school hungry and don't find the nutrients they need in our lunches. And it's a fight for educational rights that's personal because we are the only ones the district fails. And we are the last generation of students that they will fail and that this educational system will fail. Demanding the board members to fire the superintendent does not make us anti-Native. We want to make clear that demanding the superintendent, who happens to be Native, does not make us an anti-Native group. It is our actions, and our actions define our commitment to racial equity and anti-racist education, and it is clear that the superintendent's actions do not align with her commitment to racial equity and anti-racist education. Being Black or brown or Native does not automatically make you an anti-racist. And so that's our call to fire the superintendent, Juno, and replace her with somebody who is aligning with our goals. And any other members of the NAACP who want to speak up, please do.
Yeah, can I piggyback off what you said real quick? I was also a member of the Student Advisory Board. And in my time there, it honestly felt like we were used as pawns. We were used as checkboxes, and our voices did not matter. We had brought this to her attention on several occasions, and she just breezed through it. As a member of NYC, we have asked her to join several meetings, and in those meetings, she said that when we brought up ethnic studies, that she did not know like fully what ethnic studies was, and that she needed to do her homework. And when we asked her what homework she was going to do, she said she did not know, and we had to give her homework to do what she had to do. And as a superintendent, for you to be the last person to vote on something as big as ethnic studies and not know what it is and you're voting on it is not okay. For you to do your job not fully is not okay. And I would just like to say that if you want to keep your job, you have to do your job, and she's not doing her job, so she shall not keep her job. There has been several occasions where we have talked to her about what she was going to do, and she either left us on red, or she did not get back to us, or she said that she would, and never did. There was multiple occasions where she just failed to do stuff that youth were demanding. And to ignore Black students is ignoring the issues that are going on in the world. To be silent on issues of injustice is basically saying that your Black students do not matter. So going forward, when we do get a new superintendent, we want somebody who listens to us. We want somebody who will be there for us. We want somebody who will take the homework that we give them and actually implement it. And from the meetings that we have, will actually take what we say and implement it, and not just beat around the bush and do all this talking when we're in the meeting, but actually talk the talk and walk the walk.
If I could add before Gian speaks that the superintendent shouldn't need homework. You should already know this. You should already be trained. You should already be in this headspace, because once again, this isn't optional. It should be the standard.
Would any other leaders like to speak on this demand? All right, then I'm going to pass it off to you, Alexis, to intro the next segment.
We, excuse me, sorry. Next we have a speaker. Her name is Tracy Castro Gill, and she's the executive director of Washington Ethnic Studies Now. There's a lot of symbolism in her presence here. However, I will let her take it away.
Thank you, Alexis. I just want to say the reason we don't have ethnic studies in every school in Washington state right now is not because of lack of resources or leadership or knowledge or understanding. It's 100% lack of will on the part of decision makers, because any person here and in the NAACP Youth Council could run a school district better than most are being run now. I work very closely with the NYC, and I have for the past few years, and I've been so honored and humbled by their work. And so it's always a privilege and an honor for me when they ask me to speak. Alexis and Leah are also on my advisory board for Washington Ethnic Studies Now. So they work to help guide me in the direction they would like to see our organization to go in. Our organization, you could argue, exists because of the lack of effort to support ethnic studies in Seattle public schools and other school districts. So educators from Seattle and other districts in Western Washington got together, starting out as a loose collective and network of educators of color to support each other in this work. And it grew into a 501c4. So now we are a 501c4 nonprofit. And our goals, our mission is to not only advance ethnic studies in the entire state of Washington now, not just Seattle Public Schools or Western Washington, but also protect and maintain the integrity of ethnic studies to prevent it from becoming whitewashed, to center the voices of BIPOC youth and educators. And so that's where we are. And I was going to talk a little bit, if we could go to the next slide. Thanks. So a lot of the educators who were working in Seattle Public Schools to build the curriculum left that work and moved it over to Washington Ethnic Studies Now, where we can create a more authentic, BIPOC-centered curriculum than what we were able to do in Seattle Public Schools. And we've also recruited educators from other school districts. So now that work is not limited to Seattle Public Schools. Several members of the NAACP Youth Council are also involved in creating that curriculum. And this is a sneak peek of our framework that we're working on. It's not final, but this is the direction that we're going. And we have multiple opportunities for professional development and networking. We do online virtual PLCs or professional learning communities for educators who don't have access to that in their schools. And we have a 9-module, 18-hour professional development series that I've been working on. And one thing we want to talk about, if you look at the outside of the circle on this framework graphic, it's all about practice. And there's very little about content, because ethnic studies, like the students and the leaders here have been saying over and over again, it's not just about what you teach, it's about how you teach. And so the professional development and consulting services that we offer to educators and districts is 100% based on the how, and not so much the what, because I feel like, you know, Google, that's what Google's for. You can pretty much Google anything and find the what, but educators need help with the how. On Seattle Public Schools, I wanted to talk a little bit about where ethnic studies is in Washington State. That's the name of our organization, Washington Ethnic Studies Now. And what we're seeing happening on the statewide level is very similar to what's happening in Seattle Public Schools, where white educators who don't have experience, don't have expertise, don't have the lived experience, are leading these initiatives simply because they were in their role prior to these efforts being implemented or passed or recommended. So we have 2 pieces of legislation at the state level. The first one started in grades 7 through 12 that suggests an ethnic studies curriculum for like a standalone ethnic studies course. And then there was a second piece added in the last legislative session to add grades K through 6, because 7th grade is too late. I used to teach 6th grade, and by the time students came to me, they were already having these misconceptions about race and the state of racism in the country. So OSPI put together a task force, but again, it's led mostly by white educators simply because they held their positions at OSPI prior to this legislation being passed. And the voices of BIPOC educators, community members, and students are not centered, not only in the committee that was formed, but in the creation of the committee or you know, the direction of the committee. And I know there are 0 students on that committee, which hopefully people watching here today understand why that's a crime, in my opinion, that students aren't part of that decision-making and creation process. So that's where we are in Washington State. Washington Ethnic Studies Now is working with some statewide leaders on maybe a course correction of that work that's going on at the state level to kind of hit a reset and make sure that the right people are at the table and not people who don't really understand what ethnic studies is. And the fact that the state legislation, I mean, it's a step in the right direction, but the fact that they've made it a standalone only course really speaks to the lack of understanding about what ethnic studies is and what ethnic studies can be. So like I said, the fact that it's not everywhere in every classroom, every subject matter, every grade level is because a lack of will and not because of lack of knowledge or resources. We are developing frameworks for every grade level, every content area, including music, visual arts, language development, and special education. And that's what happens when you bring the right people to the table, when you bring the youth to the table, when you center BIPOC voices and BIPOC educators and BIPOC young people. That's what can happen, because we understand that this isn't about a standalone class. This is about life. It's about anti-racist abolitionist teaching and rehumanizing education spaces. So this is a call for white leaders to step aside and bring in the leaders who can transform education. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tracy. We are wrapping up our event. We thank you all so much for being here. However, there have been a lot of things being put in the chat and in the Q&A feature, great questions being asked. So we will take about 10 minutes to answer as many of those questions as possible. And before we get to that, though, there have been a lot of questions about how to contact NYC, how to get in touch with John, with the members, and this is all of our social medias and contact points. So screenshot that, put that in memory. We are excited to hear from you all. Wait a few more seconds. And, oh, sorry. Next slide. We do have a feedback form about the event, and here are the questions that will be on it. That will be put in the chat at some point. Yep, there it is. That's put in the chat. So when you get a chance to answer that, we really appreciate your feedback. Some common questions: is this being recorded? This is being recorded. We will decide at a later date if it will be released. So you guys will be able to hear all the things that were said. As far as the slides being released, I'm not sure. Someone will hopefully get back to you on that. And then our demands, what we are here for. The demands have been put in the chat, I believe. If not, we can do that again. Our list of demands will be put in the chat for you guys to go over, reference, and hopefully keep up to date on. Now for questions, if I got all the correct, okay. Does anyone from NYC want to answer a question first? Or should I ask the question first? Let's see. There were some questions that were answered personally to each of the askers, but I feel like this is valuable information that a lot of people should be aware of. Okay, so this person asked, as a therapist working with youth in Washington, how can I support them and the schools in implementing Black Lives Matter at school? I actually will answer this first, and I think that this applies to a lot of different people. You don't have to be a therapist. It doesn't have to be for specifically Black Lives Matter at school, but as a person looking to be an ally and looking to advocate for students, especially BIPOC students, in continuing this work of anti-racism, advocacy is key. I think that a lot of the time we feel helpless and we don't necessarily know what the steps are. We don't want to do it wrong. We don't want to, fail. But at the end of the day, it's often the small things that do mean the most, and doing anything that you can will make a difference. And those things do add up to a person, knowing that they have support, knowing that they have a network of people that do care for them, knowing that there's people that will go to bat for them and that do know right from wrong and are on the right side of history, as I've seen a lot of people saying lately. That does a lot. And so doing your own personal part will impact more people than you think. Oh, sorry, someone trying to speak?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't, are you done?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, I was just gonna add on that I think especially when it comes to mental health resources in our schools. So last school year, a student was shot across from our school eyesight. A whole lot of students died. It was right after school. Just a drive-by had occurred in our neighborhood. And the next day, the district had sent in, I think, 2 therapists who did not reflect the students who did not come from the neighborhood that we come from, and where their job was to basically help with the healing process, or help students begin their healing process for just one day. And it just felt really odd to have someone who wasn't familiar come into our space when we felt the need to be with people who we knew and people who we felt more comfortable around. So I think if you are looking for ways that ways to support, we need, first of all, therapists who are in our schools and know the people. We need them there year long. We need more than one per school, because there's no way one person can work with over 800 students in an entire school year. It's just not enough. And especially in a school like ours, where we have the largest number of students with ACEs or with high ACE scores. So making sure we have therapists that look like us, and mental health resources that are super accessible and super, what's the word? Sorry, the word is like not coming to me. My brain is like gonna shut down, but like not secretive, but anyone knows the word, man, I forgot, but yeah, just confidential is what I meant. Then yeah, that's what we need in our schools.
Someone also asked, are we looking for counselors or social workers or mental health workers when we were talking about the Fund Counselors Not Cops demand, and all of the above? Idon, do you want to choose the next question?
Yeah, sure. I see one in the chat right now from a PTA parent, and it says, in advocating for ethnic studies and expanding BLM programming at our school, what I need to know about how empowered individual SPS schools are allowed to be to just do these things, even if they're not official SPS things. Is there any NYC leader who would like to respond to that?
I can answer that. So basically, a lot, especially at my high school, and not even high school, but throughout my I'll just say my whole like school experience, there were some teachers that really took the time, rather than being like on the first day, like, oh, we're already late, we're off schedule, we gotta, get this going. They took the time to take stuff that we wanted to learn, like ethnic studies, and they really like taught it to us. And I can just tell you from there, the experience that the students had with like those type of teachers, rather than the teachers that said that we were already late or that we were behind already and we had to like keep going and we didn't have time to get sidetracked. I would say that all the students not only like that class more and were engaged in that class more, but learn more from that class. So I would just say, go for it. Find curriculum. I know Tracy definitely has some curriculum that you can get, and just start implementing it yourself, because the difference that you will see from the regular curriculum to ethnic studies curriculum, like just kids being engaged, kids being more alert in class, it'll just change drastically. And I feel like everything, like their grades, like everything will just go up because of the different type of curriculum this is, but also how different but important this is to implement. So I would just say go for it.
Okay, no one else wants to speak on that. There was a question. There's a lot of questions along the lines of how can I, as a blank, help, or how can blank support the efforts. So I feel like I've already spoken kind of on that. Does any NYC member want to speak on how to support NYC's demand specifically? Because there was a lot of talk about ethnic studies and things along those lines.
I just want to add in that, well, I don't think we don't have it on legislation yet, but I would keep on the lookout and educate yourself on things that you would be, especially if you're voting age. A lot of us, I think, are under 18 and can't vote, but we are asked a lot of things in our demands we're trying to get state legislation, and so we know one way you can support is be on the lookout for those bills, and yeah, vote for them. Vote for be aware of like who you're voting for, and if they support the cause that we're fighting for.
Absolutely, and that's very important in all aspects. Vote, 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 register to vote, vote, vote in presidential elections, primaries, all the elections. They're all important, and your voice is valuable.
Organizing power is also a huge factor in how things are made. There's a whole like radical talk about the impacts of voting, but also just the impact of organizing or helping with organizing, whether that's signing the petitions, whether that's attending protests, whether that is making phone calls or writing to your representatives, writing to school board members, writing to not only your local ones, but also OSPI, which is the state education bureau, I believe. So yeah, making sure you're doing that as well, and making sure they're aware of the importance of these to our communities, these demands to our communities. And so just, you know, adding pressure.
Definitely. Tracy put in the chat, organize parents and students. Parents have been essential in pushing ethnic studies in individual buildings. For sure. There's power in numbers, and when you're consistently advocating for the same thing, you're going to make people aware, and you're going to make waves.
I just wanted to say, for OSPI, now is a great time to start pressuring Chris Reichdahl. He's the superintendent of instruction in Washington State, and he's up for election. So pressure and letter writing now would really be effective in changing the way that OSPI is working.
If any attendees have any other questions, now is a great time to put them in the chat. Or if I missed any questions, for sure, make me aware, because that's possible.
Mary had a question about busing on the Q&A.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone wants to speak on that. I don't think we've discussed as a group our stance on busing.
Does anyone speak on that?
Is the question, I can't really find it. Can someone read it out loud?
Yeah. Sorry, no, you can go.
Okay, I'm curious whether this panel has a stance on desegregating neighborhood schools via busing. I worry about ethnic studies, how ethnic studies will be implemented. I doubt it will be implemented very well at very white schools.
I know NYC hasn't really had a discussion on this yet, but just like personally, I think this whole idea, wait, do you mean like busing students from school, like what they used to do, like busing students in different neighborhoods? Right, Adana's nodding. Okay. I think we should just work on equitably funding these schools and just equitably implementing ethnic studies, equitably just making things more equitable so that we don't have to do these things. It's just so similar to what the current Trump administration is doing with education, and just pushing this narrative that we need to put more students into private education, or just pushing students into this hold on, let me go back. We just need to equitably fund our schools. We need to, whatever we do in education and whatever we do in this country just needs to be equitable. We need to make sure that the resources are going around in a way that is supporting everybody.
This is Tracy. I think it was in the 90s, busing for racial diversity was ruled unconstitutional. But I think it's important to point out that white students also need ethnic studies, and some people argue they need it more than students of color. And so it's not that ethnic studies will be implemented incorrectly, it needs to be implemented differently in predominantly white schools. And, you know, putting some students of color in a white school is just in hopes that it'll improve ethnic studies is just tokenizing. And in my opinion, has the potential to cause more harm and trauma for students of color. So that's one thing that we do in our organization, is talking about how to make ethnic studies hyper local and relevant to the students in your classroom. So if you're in an all white classroom, you aren't going to necessarily teach about other people. You're going to teach those white kids about themselves and what it means to be white and what it means to value diversity and other people and other cultures and challenge white supremacy as a white person.
Thank you. We will be closing up this event. We thank you all so much for coming. We really would appreciate your feedback, which has been put, the form which has been put into the chat once again. As far as resources, because that's been something that has come up a lot. All three of the organizations that were represented by speakers today have websites: WashingtonEthnicStudiesNow.com, Black Lives Matter at School.com, and Washington NAACP Youth Council.com. So you can find resources there, and we hope to stay in touch with everyone who is looking to get more involved. There's something in the chat if you guys want to listen to that. Anyway, thank you all so much for coming. Have a nice night, and if anyone has any last words, go ahead. I will step back.
Also, real quick, sorry, if you're an educator, we do go to schools, and we basically, like, if you want, like, we talk and we can like show your kids, like your students in general, how to use their voice, how to stand up, and just stuff like that. So that email that you saw in the like page with all of our information, you can email that and we can talk, and it's going to be a lot easier on Zoom.
This is the interpreter. Are we done?
Yeah, we're done with the speaking. Thank you so much.
Good job, you guys. Enjoyed it, learned a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
Alexis and Udan, we also have two people who have their hands raised on attendees.
They had their hand raised for the whole time.
Yeah. We could still, I don't know if we want to, that might have been an accident maybe.
Probably.
I think we forgot to answer Velma's question. I'm not sure who Velma is. If you guys put it in the chat, we can answer it. Also, Adan, there's a playlist that you could play.
Oh, yeah. Let me.
That was so good. Oh my, we did that.
We're still on. There's still people here, but whatever.
Oh, Velma said. Oh, okay.
What did Velma say?
She was asking if we made a presentation to Representative Sharon Tomiko Santos.
I answered that.
Oh, you did?
I put it. Yeah, I put that in the chat.
Yeah. Well, we also have her on contact info with KO for ARE. Velma. She's the same lady, I think. I'm pretty sure that we met.
Welcome, Monica.
Yeah, thank y'all for coming. Oh, my bad. I know we're playing the music.
Wait, whose playlist is this?
I think it's Rita.
I made it for the